I'm Mike Marchlick.
And I'm Mark Swirsky.
And welcome to another edition of Insights from Great American Group. Mark, from our last taping in the fall, the holiday sales are now in. We're down a few points year over year. Comp store sales as a whole, just a handful of the store chains were positive. The balance, so the majority were negative. We had more or less a dismal outlook. For Q4, we didn't expect much to happen. We were cautiously optimistic for the first quarter, given where we are now and what we're seeing in the industry verticals. On the inventory side, wine and beverage lead the charge. Chemicals are very strong. What are you seeing on the fixed asset side?
Well, certainly what I like to say now more than anything else is flat is the new up. Now that we're not seeing the precipitous drops in value like we did through the third and fourth quarter of 08 and all of 09, is we're seeing things they're starting to solidify and bottom out with respect to value. Obviously, there's some better performing verticals than some others, and there's still some verticals that are mixed. As we discussed before, food, beverage, pharma, process, and packaging we feel is still very strong and will continue to be very strong. We are not seeing the strength in numbers that we saw through 09, but again, through 2008, 2009, we did not even see the values in those industries drop that much. So to see them even stabilize right now today and not dropping at all is fantastic. The other place that we see is, of course, metals manufacturing. That is certainly, we're seeing some uptick in value there. Over 07, 08, and into 09, we saw a flooding of the market of metals manufacturing related assets. Sure. And we saw a lot of those assets get absorbed into the economy over the last few years and were sold. And now we're seeing a little bit more of an appetite for, say, extrusion presses and things of that nature. Also, what is where we're very strong is the heavy mobile equipment vertical with the construction, cranes, truck trailers, etc. Still seeing a high level of trade there. Seeing values bouncing back a little bit as well, too. As you know, we had a very large sale in November with a very large construction spread that was very well attended, well attended across the country, and many international buyers, and had strong sales there. And just had the recent sale in Maryland where we were coming in about 40% higher than our values than we expected.
And HME, though, is it cranes that are strong, or is it the yellow iron? If you were, I know we talk about, really understanding what's going on within the vertical.
Sure.
Can you expand on that?
Construction is particularly strong right now. Certainly not at the numbers that we'd like it to be, but certainly it's come back quite strong. Crane values have done pretty well. In fact, the cranes that were sold just last week, Kissimmee, seem to be doing okay with respect to value. Trucks and trailers, unfortunately, while there's still a high level of trade there, the values are down. And in fact, we did not see the pre-buying of 2010 Class 8 truck tractors that the market would have liked to have seen with respect to the emission standards. We are seeing some large fleet operators testing the newer vehicles, but they are still working on their older vehicles and aging out their fleet at a longer useful life than they were before.
But what is the level of supply for the older tractors right now?
Too much. We have an oversupply of tractors. We have an oversupply of dry van trailers.
That speaks to the
values that are declining. We will see these assets, these troubled assets, get absorbed in the economy in the next few years, but certainly it's going to take a number of years before we come back out of there and we see a robust appetite for future expansion.
Mark, earlier referenced metals. Within the inventory vertical, we're seeing a rebound in values for metals. More or less the destocking effect that we saw in the middle to latter portion of 2008 into 2009 is over. In chemicals, we're beginning to see values increase because of increased utilization, and made-to-order inventories are really big right now. And what we're getting is the benefit of a weaker dollar, so exports are starting to increase as well.
Right. So, Michael, we've talked about a couple of industrial verticals and the pluses and minuses thereof. From the retail sector, where are we seeing? What are we seeing out there with respect to different verticals, say apparel versus consumer electronics? How are those trending now as a comparison to last year? And what do we think what's going to happen through the end of the year?
Great question. They're both stable right now. On the apparel side, supply and demand, or more or less, at equal levels right now, which is making it easier for distributors and retailers. The cost of garments is starting to decline a bit because fiber prices are coming down. On the consumer electronics side, the holiday season was okay for them, but the double-digit growth that we've seen in the previous years when the economy was much more robust and stronger and consumer credit was stronger, we're not going to see that growth in the near future. So it's stable, but consumer electronics is always looked at as a vertical that's growing, but we don't see that in the near future.
That's a good answer. I have a follow-up question to that with respect to that. And again, as a armchair economist, and then we'll have Jay on later, who's a real economist.
Sure.
I walk into I walk into Best Buy, and you can't get through the place. It's packed with people. But you walk in some of the malls today, one is packed, one is empty. What do we feel? And what our retail liquidation folks say about what are we going to see with respect to the velocity of retail liquidations this year as comparison to last year? I know we talk about so many store closings and anchor stores going out and the co-tenancy agreements and whatnot. I mean, I drive up and down the streets in any town that I'm ever in, and all I see is for lease and for sale signs. What do you think we're going to go with respect to our retail platform and what's going to happen?
Well, retail locations will have to come down in number. We all know there's still too many of them because we can see it based on foot traffic. Location is everything, and if the crowd is going to the desirable locations, there's plenty that are left behind that are slow, and that's affecting volume. Eventually, the money that's been set aside and the funds that are available to some of these retail chains will shrink and dry up in some cases, and that will force them to make some closings. We expect those closings.
Sure. Switching gears to two other verticals that we track very closely, both from appraisal standpoint and a liquidation standpoint, and both from industrial and machinery equipment verticals, is both building materials and automotive. I know from the building materials manufacturing side, we have had a tremendous overcapacity in that vertical, and we've shed a lot of capacity from a manufacturing perspective over the last 18 months. We are probably still going to be looking at some more liquidations of on the manufacturing sector, especially when it goes to speak of doors, windows, trusses, etc. There are some very large players out there that are household names that are still holding their own, and will probably continue to do okay, once the cycle turns and we see housing starts to pick up again. And then from the automotive sector, again, another sort of broad spectrum of manufacturing. We've seen certain verticals or certain types of equipment in the automotive sector do fine, say late model CNC machine tools, which can be retooled for say aerospace or medical parts. But then you have smaller late model plastic injection molding that can be used for consumer goods. But your larger tonnage stamping presses and your larger tonnage plastic injection molders are certainly going by way of the buggy whip, if you will. So with respect to the inventory side of the business, both from an appraisal and liquidation side, what are we seeing with respect to the building product side and with the automotive side?
Okay. Building products, supply and demand are more or less matched at this point. There was excess supply, several months ago until late 2008, if you look back. That demand and supply has been matched up, and it's actually stabilizing and holding its own right now. Regarding automotive, right now it's a question of moving out the slow-moving items. There was so much supply and excess supply that it's a purging effect right now. So there are many distributors and manufacturers out there that are actually trying to purge some of the excess supply right now, and we're working with a few of them to help them.
So I'm hearing that the OEMs are still suffering to some extent. What about the aftermarket suppliers, your do-it-yourselfers? We understand those stores are doing quite well because obviously people are keeping their cars longer and deferring dealer maintenance and doing it themselves. Is that still something we see that's going to be strong through the rest of 2010?
We will. Hard parts, is always in question because the tough thing about the hard parts is you never know when you're going to need an alternator or a starter for a vehicle. But what does really well are the maintenance items, the lubricants, the oils, the solvents, filters, batteries, stuff that anyone with a wrench and some courage, in some cases, and common sense can do their own maintenance, just to save some money. Sure. And to take an interest in their vehicle to get to and from work right now. This economy's humbling people, so they're going to great lengths to learn these new tricks.
Sure.
Mark, in the food industry, we're seeing stabilization and some cases upticks due to the fact that people still need to eat, regardless of what the economy's doing, as well as our weak dollar is fueling exports, similar to what we talked about in chemicals. Sure. What are you seeing, with respect to fixed assets? How are those values holding up on the fixed asset side in M&E?
Well, they certainly are holding up well and strong. As you know, I always like to say, try to go a day without eating or without opening something packaged.
I'll get back to that in a second. Keep going.
Okay. We are very strong with respect to the food and beverage and pharmaceutical industries today. Which is also curious is that we have not seen the downturn in value in those verticals that we saw in other industries over the last, say, 18 months. We are starting to see a little softening of value today, but we never saw the precipitous drops in late 2008 and in 2009 that we saw in the other industries. We still think we feel we're going to be long on this. We like the vertical. Late and great is key. Late model manufacturing, brand names, etc. Good transferability and adaptability are obviously key on any manufacturing side. We certainly think there's no reason to be concerned about food, beverage, and pharma processing packaging today. The one issue would be, older plant machinery, 10 years old or older. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to liquidate these days. We understand there's a lot of CapEx out there right now, budgeted for 2010 and for 2011 with respect to expansion. Very, very comfortable with that vertical today.
Now back to paper and packaging, which you just talked about. That's a large vertical for us that we track. But this year, we more or less split the performance between paper and packaging. We feel very good about packaging. It does well. It recovers well. There's a need for it, to your point earlier. Go a day without eating food that you don't have to open or take out of a package is nearly impossible today. Paper, not so good. On our side, excess capacity, plant closures, can't sell enough paper right now to get out of our way. Equipment-wise.
You're singing my song the same way. We have a tremendous overcapacity within the paper manufacturing vertical, both domestically and internationally. Unfortunately, we have paper machines that will probably never get sold worldwide today. There's just so much of an excess capacity. Pulp, paper making, paper machine related, newsprint, etc. Tremendous glut worldwide. It's going to be very difficult to ever get out of this. To my surprise is that newspapers are still being sold today. We haven't seen newspaper liquidations in quite some time, but that'll certainly be coming. Also with respect to paperboard, cardboard, etc. Again, still a large glut, but not as bad as say your craft papers and your newsprints, etc. Packaging side we like a lot, especially within respect to plastic, because plastic is somewhat, or some of the biodegradable materials today are coming on very strong. We see, the corn-based products, etc., that are going to be taken over. But again, packaging in and itself related, I don't see that going away. I just see it shifting to some of the other, bio materials, etc. As far as the plastic side, again, almost like the paper machine side, large quantity of it. The older machines, the thermoforming, etc., it's going to be very difficult to sell in the next couple of years.
Going back to paper, is there, is this a purging of what needs to happen, with the growth of e-books, the new release iPad? It's been released, but it's not in stores yet, I don't think. All this the electronic commerce and the electronic ways of communication, whether it be PDFs, do you think this is a purging?
I think it's a purging to some extent. And we've seen this coming for years. Anybody that didn't see the demise of newsprint, if you will, coming, obviously had been living under a rock. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of newspapers, nor are we ever going to get rid of printed matter and material, at least not in my generation or lifetime. What we are going to see, though, is a lesser reliance on it. So even though we're seeing some, as I mentioned, some newspapers being traded as businesses, I believe that's more of an ego play and a strategic move, and not necessarily so much of a financial move. So whereas we see some big financial players in the market, buying and selling trading papers, I don't believe they're doing it because they see a big uptick in readership and subscriptions. Sooner or later, again, we're going to see some newspapers fall, and some other, you see magazines shutting down like crazy today. Unfortunately, I think the magazines are getting more affected by the electronic age or the information age than, say, are the newspapers. But yes, there is a purging going on right now, and I think it's going to continue to stay that way.
Great. Thank you.
And for more information on Great American Group, you can visit us at greatamerican.com. Thank you for joining us.